just not being able to read it very well. So my apologies to anyone that's been trying to read all this amazing information that I've got on my website about all these topics and hasn't been able to see it. No problem if you were going through a laptop or a tablet maybe, but yeah. But it's fixed. I fixed it.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. So
Anyway,
let's start on the topic of, I guess we really need to set an example. So and really give people what is attachment, how is bonding formed from a newborn. Let's go back there, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's exactly where it starts. So our instinct when we're born is we're helpless, right? And we have very clear ways of making sure that we get our needs attended to. Crying and screaming loudly is exactly for that reason. And we are supposed to tug on the heartstrings of mum and dad. And obviously we are literally been attached to... There's my alarm. She didn't bark last week, but today I think the neighbour's dog's barking.
That's okay.
Working in, so here we are, all the pets. So the other one, she just stands there. Anyway, where was I? So we're supposed to be really well attached to our mother because we literally are through our umbilical cord. And we're supposed to have, as a mother, we're supposed to have that nurturing, bonding, protective feeling. And then the dad is meant to have that also. But it shows up in other ways. But we all have a masculine and a feminine side, so two sides to us. And so when a dad has a child come into the world, it is supposed to ignite those feelings of protection but also love and gentleness and all those things. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on, and the same for mums. The mother bear or mother lioness, where she protects her cubs, but she's also incredibly patient and nurturing and understanding and all those things. And we do give more of ourselves to our children than we would give to anyone else. However, that's unfortunately not always the case, as is our human experience. We're all here to learn different things. And so very, very frequently, that natural bonding and attachment is interrupted or not there at all. And for some, it's actually over the top and it becomes overbearing, and that's equally as damaging. So that's where things start. Did you want to say anything about that?
Look, I guess like for a lot of people, and definitely like I can only relate to people who go to foster care or go through foster care, because that was my experience. And the earliest memory that I have of my parents, besides being in hospital, was one of the fondest memories, I guess, is where my dad took me to his work and we played in his sand truck or dump truck, whatever it was. But people in foster care, I guess, I can only relate from that point of view. When you get taken off your parents, you lose the bonding. You lose, you basically feel abandoned. And whether or not you realize that during your adulthood or during your childhood, it doesn't matter. It is there. And look, it's something that I'm now, as an adult, closer to my parents today, my biological parents, than what I have ever been.
Yes.
But...
And what has that taken for you to work through, just briefly, because we'll actually discuss that later on. We'll kind of go through the process. But for you to be in that position today, has that taken a lot of work on your behalf?
I guess, like, for me, it's like you can't hold... You got a helicopter above you. You can't hold your parents guilty or like... If you hold anger because of mistakes they've made, or and that's in general. Like it is actually really hard to actually discuss from the point of view as like, do I forgive them for being alcoholics and domestic violence? Yeah, of course they make human mistakes. Do I wish they never did it? Of course.
Yeah.
Like, there is that double.
But it's your journey.
Yeah, and like, look, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the journey I've had. I would not have the story I have to tell if it wasn't for experiencing it. Whether or not, like, my story is no bigger or no smaller than anyone else's. But one of the biggest things is when you're a child and whether it's foster care or whether it's adoption, it doesn't matter. You are taken away from your biological parents.
That's right. And the thing is that that's only done unless some parents are offering up, or a single mum or whatever, are offering up a child for adoption willingly. To be taken away from parents is a whole other experience. And that means that something very, very dysfunctional is happening in that home, whether it is through domestic violence, whether it's through drug and alcohol abuse, whether it's through neglect. It just, it depends on the scenario. And for some people, it's all of those things and more, sexual abuse and
I guess, like,
families and
I guess for me particular, it's like you get put into a home that's supposed to be a resemblance of a mother or father, and this is supposed to be your safe space. But then when they take you away from your biological parents, who might be doing the wrong thing, but then put you in a home where the wrong thing still happens, you kind of...
which happens a lot.
Yeah, it happens hugely. And it's like, well, hang on. Would I have been safer with my parents, my biological parents, or in the government hands? I personally say my biological parents.
Right.
Look, they might have been domestically violent, but to me, they never hit me. So, to me, they never abused me. The foster parents I was with did abuse me. The foster parents did put me in harm's way. And it's one of those things that no one wants to take responsibility for. Even today, for example, like we've had some breaking news headlines as of yesterday with Cardinal George Pell, which we won't get into. But
no, we won't go into that today.
It's one of those things where if something does happen to a child, the justice system is not there. They say they're there, but they're not.
Yeah.
For people who go through foster care, if you was, I'll touch on it quite a little bit because to explain what I'm trying to say, I have to touch on it a little bit. But for people who were sexually abused as a child, you can get compensation from the government. You can sue the government or the representing authority figure. For example, Uniting Church, you can do churches, etc., etc. But if you're just abused in foster care or in a government facility or a church facility, there is no compensation for you. There is, and it's not about the compensation because it shouldn't be happening anyway. But if it's not for people like myself who have to come out and say, look, this happened to me. And whether you get money out of it, whether you don't get money out of it, it doesn't matter. It's not about the money aspect. It's about actually making sure that no other person, no other child actually has to go through what I went through or what hundreds of thousands of people around Australia and probably even millions around the world had to go through. Because we can't... I had this discussion with you last week off the air. We can't change back time. We can't go back.
No, that's right.
And rewind the clock. We can't.
But we can change. We can use this hindsight and make change going forward.
And I think that's the
But
key.
it's interesting what you said though about you would rather have stayed with your family, your biological parents, than go into the abusive foster situation
Yeah.
family. But of course, you didn't know that was going to be the case.
Well, I
And
was,
had that
yeah,
foster family been more effective, a more positive experience, then of course you wouldn't necessarily be regretting going into foster care. So it always depends on, when we're looking back, it always depends on how well these things have gone. And it was unfortunate for you that your foster situation was not as good as it needed to be.
I think.
That you would even choose to go back to,
Well, see,
the
that's the thing. I think like
other family.
I think the problem is like we talk about attachment. Your instinct is to as a child, your instinct is to attach to a mother figure. Some people might attach to their father figure, but for I can only speak about me. It is to attach to a mother figure. I didn't have a father
Yeah,
as a child.
yeah,
It's not that
yeah,
like my biological parents, yes, mum and dad are there, but
yeah,
as a child, we're talking from the period of birth to the period of 16. Um,
yeah.
there was no child. There was no. There was no parent that I could trust. There was no
Right.
parent that I could really respect. I guess like if a
Yes.
child is meant to be able to feel trusted, believed, respected,
Yes.
and if that doesn't exist, then you really
You can go off the rails
you can.
completely. Absolutely. So that's what I want to actually bring it back to. So thanks for sharing all of that, because it has come right round to where I was going in this first initial stages of understanding about attachment and bonding. So, we can understand that that's nature, and that's hopefully our natural instinct to bond and protect our offspring. And as we've just been saying, it doesn't always go that well. But the reason that those instincts are there is for two things. And ultimately, this is what we are all trying to achieve 100% of the time, is a sense of safety and security. So when we feel safe and secure in our immediate environment and in the greater community and the world, then we're able to function at our best. And for most people, that isn't the case, because look at where at the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment. There's a lot of fear and anxiety, which is pretty, understandable. So our sense of safety and security in the greater world is really being disrupted right now. So we're going to start to see a lot of mental health and behavioural issues coming out. I'm not going to go into that right now. Into our community, how does the community respond to something like this pandemic? And we were seeing people on TV, the TV stations are trying their best to help say, we're all in this together, and all these beautiful messages coming from all the celebrities from their homes, and trying to normalise a situation so that we as a community feel safe and secure. Really, really important for anxiety and stress, mental health, but also so that people actually stay calm and don't start, going crazy and doing things like, burning buildings down and all that kind of stuff. It actually needs to keep the masses calm. And then our immediate environment, so we're self-isolating. So this COVID thing is a great example of our instinct, where we might go around and disinfect everything and keeping people at, 2 arms length distance, and only going to the shops when we need to, and all that sort of stuff. So it's a similar principle when you're talking about creating safety and security for a baby. The baby needs to feel safe and close, which is why now we've gone back to baby wearing, where you know have the child on the baby on your body. Long-term breastfeeding, because the breast, I spoke about last week about the oral fixation. So as a baby, and for a long time into toddlerhood, our oral fixation is really important. And so, yes, they want to feed and be on the breast as a pacifier for quite some time. And unfortunately, we've gone away from that belief. There's, during the 60s and 70s, possibly even the 50s, I'm not clear on that. There's this instruction that mothers are mollycoddling and you should put your child down and you shouldn't pick your baby up when it cries, and you should give it a dummy, you shouldn't put it on the breast, all those sorts of things. So that has interrupted attachment and bonding for a lot of mothers and babies. I mean, mothers will stand there and not pick up their baby because great-grandmother over there says you're going to spoil the child because of, the lessons that they were taught when they came through. And I'm really pleased to say that these days we are understanding all of these needs so much better, and we're going back to our natural instincts. But there's a long, long, long way to go.
Yeah.
And so when that natural bonding is interrupted, other things, start to happen around insecurity with the child. And, whether that's through adoption or fostering or just through insecure parenting, a parent not being well, there being a split in the family, all those things, an interruption to attachment is a very easy thing to happen, but it has huge consequences if there isn't a solution in place. So, for example, like what you said, if you had had a foster family, a mother figure that had been effective, then perhaps a lot of what you went through wouldn't have occurred.
I think it's really look during this period of time. I guess firstly, parents are now staying at home. That's number one, which means that this is now the real point. Like, you can use this time to actually bond with your child,
Yes.
and use this time wisely. Like, if you're a father who normally goes to work, or even a mother who normally goes to work, use this time to actually be there for your child. Whether it is their grades are not as good. Studying right now, in general, is most probably really hard for a child. Some children, I was having this conversation with one of the people here at the studio, and we were talking about how some kids might not have internet, and they might still be really good at studying, but because they can't do the online classes, they're going to they're going to rely on their parents to actually help them, or their grades are going to slip. And it's really, really, look, that's just one side of the story. The other...
Well, my friend's divorced, and her children go between their two houses, and she's run out of data, because the kids are home. They've run out of, what do you call it when it's a peak period data. So it's actually really handy that they can go over to their dad's place for the next couple of weeks and use up his data.
That's just a...
and they love doing their schooling. They actually go to an independent school down south of Perth, and they absolutely love what they do because the environment for their schooling is different. And I'm not going to go there about schooling and teachers and all that stuff. I've got friends that are teachers. That's not the issue here. But these children really love their schooling, and so it's been fantastic for them to be able to be at home and do things that they enjoy. But they're using up all the data.
It is really interesting that that's just one small thing, but there's other ways to teach a kid too. And like we're talking about the topic today of attachment, bonding, and healing as a core. Now, part of that bonding is doing things like fixing a car, like even and this is the other thing I guess. Like,
Yes.
let's say that your kid's a teenager. They're maybe not interested in cars. Let's say they're more interested in cooking or something. Even just like acknowledging what they're interested in and sitting down with them and talking to them, and maybe, look, if they want to play their Xbox or their PS4, play it with them. It doesn't mean that you have to stop being a parent. It doesn't mean that you have to, like, one of the biggest things for me was I'd never had a father figure. And that meant that I was discovering adolescence. I was discovering manlyhood basically by myself, with no reliance on a male figure. Now, the foster home had a male person, but I didn't feel comfortable talking to a male person. And I think that that's also, and you don't have to be in foster care to feel that way. You can be a perfect family, and your kid might just not want to talk to one of the parents. They might prefer to talk to the dad, or they might prefer to talk to their mum, or they might prefer to talk to their grandma.
What actually happens is it's called individuation. So we've kind of jumped from the attachment and bonding. I want to go back to that though. But when children start to individuate from their parents, which is a really important psychological and biochemical phase, that they're starting to want to be autonomous. And so what happens is friends become more important than mum and dad. But this is where a lot of clashing happens in the family, because the parents, if they don't truly understand this, and if their negative ego can't handle being put to the side, then a lot of frustration and a lot of arguments and a lot of family, dysfunction can occur at this time. So it's really important for children to find their tribe, their friends, and of course as parents we're trying to guide them into being with the nice kids and all of that sort of thing, because we want the best for them. We don't want them to be with kids that are doing the wrong thing, right? But they will find their own way. And if a parent becomes jealous or negative around their child individuating and turning to their peers as their first preference for discussing things, for example, body changes, sexuality, periods and wet dreams and all those things that happen, it's not the sort of stuff that kids usually want to talk about with their parents because it's embarrassing. It's great that we as a community are trying to normalize that again, and make even like for women and girls, making that new time, sacred for them and so on. That's awesome. But they're more likely to want to discuss this sort of stuff with their friends who are going through the same thing at the same time. And this is where our bonding and attachment with our child does make a difference, because if we can have open conversation with our kids, even if they're sitting there squirming and feeling feeling uncomfortable, and even if they're not offering anything back in return, but you're giving them information and you're talking about your own experiences and so on, all of that is going in. And so when the kids sit around and talk about it together, they actually will share, oh, well, my mum said, or I heard this. And so it's parenting through like a layer, so that sort of stuff's really, really important, although it might be really difficult as a parent to, first of all, you've got to understand it, and secondly, put all the fighting and the upset, if that's happening, to one side, and continue to really loving guidance is the key there.
And I think that's the biggest thing, because like my look, when I was seeing a psychologist, they turned around to me and said the biggest question, what is love? And
Oh well,
my answer was it's a four-letter word that we put too much emotion to.
yeah.
It's LOVE. Now, and he turned around to me, the psychologist turned around to me and said, well, you're actually correct. It is just a
Mm,
four-letter word. And I said, look, it's the fact that I think, as someone who went through all the abuse and all that kind of stuff, did I ever feel loved? No. Um, did I ever feel believed? No. Did I ever feel respected? No. Did I ever feel trusted? No.
yeah,
Did I ever feel
yeah,
what a child should have felt? No.
yeah.
Um,
So these are all the things that come from a healthy relationship with a primary caregiver. Ideally, it would be mum and dad, the nuclear family, because they both have an important role, and that they wouldn't be drug addicts or alcoholics or abusers, or and we'd have the white picket fence and all that sort of stuff. That's the ideal.
yeah.
And we know it doesn't always happen. And even in, like I've said, my childhood was great. I had, as in my family life, even my childhood, but I had circumstances. I've had some awful things happen. My family's like any other family. We have stuff. But even having what I would call a great childhood, I still ended up with emotional wounds.
Yeah.
And um, I count myself lucky that I did have a good bond with my mum, because at the time, because had I not, uh, I don't know what could have happened to me. I could have ended up running away from home or something like that. Yeah, and I think men need to also understand how important it is to be gentle with your children. And this isn't talking about letting them get away with things that they shouldn't get away with. This is about having this connection and this depth of love and compassion and empathy and protection of your child. And what you said before about you didn't feel trust, you didn't feel, all these things are so important to the development of a healthy mind and spirit in a child. And so they need to feel, as I said before, safe and secure. They're the two first things. And they need to feel unconditionally loved. So
So
when we're able to to see that we're putting our fears, our wants, our desires onto our kids, then that's not unconditional love.
So let me ask this question, because you said unconditional love is
Yeah.
something that every child needs and deserves. My question is, how, like, clearly, the easy question is yes, I do love myself today. The hard question is, how does someone know if they have unconditional love?
They feel accepted and worthy.
Yep. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
And like I don't know if anyone ever experiences 100% unconditional love in as a parent child. I don't know if that's possible, because no one's perfect, and so we're all going to do certain things. But if we are able to self-reflect, and if we're able to hear our kids when they say, I really don't like it when you do that to me, if we're able to to look back and say, yeah, actually that I was trying to be a bit controlling, or I was being unkind or whatever it was, and own it and apologize and make change, then fantastic. And we're validating that child, and they feel heard. They can trust that they can have a voice and be respected, and they're not going to be hit or abused for it, or ridiculed, or told to get out. Yeah, so the way we parent children makes a huge difference, not just to obviously the health and well-being of the child, and the family, but to the community and the broader, you know, the world. Because when as kids, if we don't get those feelings of safety, security, you know, a good dose of unconditional love, feeling heard, feeling validated, feeling worthy, feeling accepted, feeling that we can trust others, that others trust us, that there's honesty, all the good stuff. If we don't have a good dose of that stuff, then it really affects our psyche, and it changes, it shapes who we become. And essentially it affects our thoughts and feelings about ourselves, about others and the world, and then it impacts on our behaviour. And so that we see, I mean, look at the news, we see that all the anger that's in this world, because there's all these little inner children that have been abused or neglected or whatever, and they're all just running around, with sticks and guns and drugs and alcohol, and it's a shame. It's an absolute shame.
It's one of the hardest things to really understand. For me personally, I can look back on my childhood, and yes, I'm still angry about it. And I think we had a conversation, me and you, Indigo, a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Let's put it this way: doing a Facebook Live really did change my opinion on myself, and it was the fact that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel that you were hurt, or that the abuse that ruined your childhood. Because like one of the biggest things is when you are hurt and your inner child is basically destroyed. At least that's how I feel. It's how do you build it back? Clearly, the bond with my biological parents is fantastic. I currently live with them. My mum and dad have helped me build this company, and I'm really and I've got a loving partner of 11 years who is supporting. So when it comes to building that bond, I guess, like, it's never too late to fix it. That's what I was trying to get to. Is it can be fixed if you have broken the trust, or if you had broken bond.
I'm going to kind of interrupt.
Do you disagree? Do you disagree?
The reason I'm interrupting you there is that you're saying that it can be fixed, that it can be healed. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can fix it in the real world, as in outside of yourself. But what you can do is heal it inside. And that can be done whether those parents are around you or whoever's involved, whether they're around you or not, and whether they're alive or not. Yeah. So I'll actually want to discuss that a little bit more. But before I do that, not everyone, unfortunately, not everyone's open to reconnecting with their adopted or fostered children, for starters, or they're their estranged family. Yeah. There are some people that you do not want to have contact with.
Totally
and I've
agree.
spoken heaps about my ex narcissistic ex-husband, and the effect of that personality type on not just me but our children, who are now adults, is I don't even know the word. It's
look. It's one.
Their life in ways that it just keeps showing up, and reconciling with that type of personality isn't necessarily a wise thing to do, because no contact is actually the best way.
Oh, look, I do agree with you. Like,
Yeah.
if I look at the abuse that happened to me in foster care, I definitely would not want to see those people again. And
Yeah.
it's not because I just want to move on. It's because I would most
Yeah.
probably want to bash them. And that's
Right. It's for their safety.
that's just me. Now, that just
Mhm.
shows you that yes, it's still raw to me. And yes,
Mm.
there's images in my head. Even just mentioning them in that the way I just did, flashes of images just showed up in my head of who they were and the things that they did.
Yeah.
And it's like those images never go away. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
about what. It's almost like the more I talk about it, the better I get at it.
The images can go away once they've been dealt with and healed sufficiently. Um, maybe you've got post-traumatic stress around the abuse, which is very, very likely, and having flashbacks and that sort of thing is, really normal. Doesn't happen like that for everyone, but it just depends on the individual and how intense it's been, and for the duration as well. But then you can have one experience and have one image that flashes back, constantly. So it depends on each individual person. Yeah.
It's really interesting because I guess I can only speak for myself and I've got five brothers and sisters including me. I'm the middle child.
Right.
My sister follows me on Facebook, but we don't really talk. My
Right.
brother follows all like we all follow each other on Facebook, but we don't communicate.
Yeah.
And that was because part of foster care was the splitting of the children. We all went to different foster homes. And that was purely because one foster home said, "Oh, we want the girls, not the boys."
Yeah.
And I think like that when you rip a family dynamic up, as well, that can, of course, mess with people.
Yeah.
And without talking about my sisters, because I'm sure they wouldn't rather me not talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting their beliefs that they've told me, and I really won't go into it. But when it's like, uh, it's just really, really hard to actually articulate what I'm wanting what I would normally want to say, but I'm just remembering to actually respect other people's privacy. And
Yes.
that's one of the biggest things is like they know I love them. They absolutely do. At least if they don't, they definitely know now. um, but it's really interesting because like, how do you heal yourself from trauma or from abuse? It's look,
Mm.
I've been very open about my past.
Yeah.
Since what 2010 to 2019, I was a drug addict. Like, there's no two ways about it. You can't rewind time and say,
Mm-hmm.
oh no, I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I've been sober nearly a whole year, which I wasn't celebrating as such. But then come Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because such stuff I got drunk on Friday, did a live stream, never a good idea. But on Sunday, I did a post on Facebook and just said it as it was. Like, well, it was 11 months, 11 days on that day, which is incredible. So where do I see my mental health now compared to where I was a year ago? A lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I see that I'm not staying in my bed. I'm not isolating myself from the world. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going on with what this world has to
Yeah.
bring and offer.
And what we often do is we recover to a certain degree, and then we are able to function. So we can be a highly functioning depressive. We can be a highly functioning anxious person. So it just depends on what level we get to in our managing and handling and stuffing it all down and ignoring it and avoiding it and all those things, and how much of recovery we're able to create for ourselves on our own. Then some people go and get therapy, get some help for that, and other people do other things, especially around energy healing. So for me, the first thing that I would always recommend is an inner child healing, where we're not just talking about what happened and rehashing the story, not just going back to, this is what happened to me, and it was awful, and I'm angry at my parents or at whoever it was that, the perpetrator, and this is how it's affecting my life, and it's going around in circles, and I just can't, stop it. So what we have to do is go into that wounded child that's still at that age when it occurred. And so for some people, for example, like yourself, who's had so much happen, this can be quite a lengthy experience. However, often the experiences are really, really similar, and they've been happening with the same person. So there's certain techniques that I use where we are actually speaking to the wounding, we're speaking to the perpetrator within, from within ourselves, and we can do a lot of recovery by addressing that person or those people or the incident itself from within us. But you need to be taken through that so that you're not re-traumatized. And unfortunately, that's what can happen a lot. That happens a lot with people that are untrained. There's a lot of people out there saying that they're trauma informed in their therapy, and that they can help you do a regression or this, that, and the other. And they're not actually qualified. They don't actually know what they're doing. And re-traumatizing someone through sexual abuse is a big one, especially, women going and trusting some, facilitator, some guy who says that he can, help you clear sexual abuse. Well, he might be really good at the talking stuff, and it all makes sense. I mean, this could be male or a female, of course, but whether they understand how easy it is for someone to be re-traumatized is very, very important. So when you're looking for your healers and facilitators and therapists, you really need to make sure that they know what they're doing.
It's one of those really hard things, I guess, when you're when you are the person seeking out that support and seeking out that help.
Yeah.
Because look, honestly, I've seen so many ads now for personal coaching, for personal development,
Yeah.
for all that, and I'm like going, well, realistically, how do I actually know that you actually know your stuff?
Know what you're doing. Yeah.
When I've spoken to counselors and people in the industry, it's like, well, you might have a medical certificate or a university diploma, master's, whatever, but you didn't live my life. You didn't live what I went through, and how are you going to relate to me? I don't want to feel the pity. I don't want to feel the, oh, we're so sorry for you. I just want, like, ideally, I would like that period of my life just wiped from my head. It will not happen. You have to replace a memory with something. So it's like, well, do you wear the scar as a battle symbol, or do you like there are
Well,
so
what you've just said there about wiping it from your memory, right, and replacing it with something happy. I just want to get into that a little bit. So when we heal something, truly heal it, we make peace with it, right? So the memory is no longer painful, or as painful, at least. It's not as painful. And because we've been able to emotionally move on, it's not coming up again and again and again. there might be certain triggers that we haven't dealt with, and it comes up some later stage in life. You go, oh wow, that's really triggered, something. But if we work at all angles of that experience from within you, then you really do make peace with it. And one of the steps that's very, very important, well, there's a few steps actually to this particular thing in making peace in the therapy that I do, is that you're able to see the reason why. Ooh, this is a big one, but to make sense of why something happened to you.
Yep.
That's a really, really big concept. And for some people, they're going to reject that completely. And I understand that. It does come back down to a broader structure or overlaying faith about why we're here and why bad things happen to good people. And having a faith structure, doesn't have to be religious, is really important in being able to make sense, make sense out of the madness. And so reaching a place where you're able to make sense of it for you, that creates freedom.
Yeah, it does. Like, from the point of view as, like, look, I've come to the realization that I can't change back time. I can't go back and solve, like, there was a long time that I had vivid dreams. Like, I'll go to sleep, and as I've shared in a previous video, in a previous show with you, of the dog who was poisoned and who fed it was me. I didn't know it had bleach in it, but that was a traumatic experience for me. For a long time, like, we're talking in my 20s, I was having dreams night after night trying to solve this mystery of how I could have known better, or how I could have made sure that the foster mother didn't put the bleach in the dog food. Like, and it played with my mind, like, it played with my head so much, where it was me just telling myself over and over and over again, there is nothing.
It wasn't your fault.
Well, there was nothing I could have done. That whole outcome was set in stone before I even was there.
So what you did was you forgave yourself.
Yeah,
right?
like I don't.
That's actually what happened.
Yeah, like, I don't forgive her. I forgive me.
You forgive you. So when I do a healing session with someone, we're speaking about inner child healing right now, I help that person reach forgiveness in that moment quickly.
Yeah.
So rather than it taking years and years and years and years, or months and months and months to reach forgiveness, we actually reach it. We go through the steps. It's a linear process. So you have to achieve one thing, so that then you can achieve the next step, and then achieve the next step. And getting to the step of forgiveness cannot be rushed. You cannot get to forgiveness from within you for yourself or for someone else if you haven't done these other steps beforehand. And a lot of people don't understand that, because they rush into, you must forgive, I must forgive. And actually, you've got to validate first. You've got to be heard. You've got to be seen. You've got to be understood. You've got to feel safe. You've got to feel all sorts of things before you can reach forgiveness. And if those things aren't done sufficiently, you can't actually fully forgive. And that's where my technique and my, I suppose, skill comes into this, is that I can, because I understand this so well, and I've got the intuitive abilities, I can see and feel and understand where those steps haven't been completed, and why when we're testing out forgiveness, there's still resistance there.
So I guess my question then is, if you're trying to heal your inner child, do you have to forgive the perpetrator who did it to you, or that, like, or in this case, the foster mother, for example?
Right. So it's exactly the same. The forgiveness happens later at a different stage. It all has to be acknowledged to start with. You've got to have a voice. So in this process, this healing session, you will have that voice that you couldn't have then. And you might have been saying all this stuff for years and being screaming at them and writing them letters and dropping, steaming turds at the door. You might have been doing all this stuff, but this inner child hasn't actually been heard, or the inner teenager, or who, or even this inner adult from, 5 seconds ago. So, but we're talking about, the childhood stuff. So if we bring it back to, attachment and bonding and so on, and one of the big things, let's say, that dads haven't been present, right? Because they've had to go off to work, and they've also learnt that they've had to suck it up. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to be, big girls' blouse, all those things, right? So I'm really doing a stereotypical thing here where the guy likes his footy and his pie and his beer, and that's all fine, but he doesn't really have much of a connection with his kids, right? I'm sorry, I'm being very stereotypical.
No, it's sometimes you need to be stereotypical to actually make a point.
Yeah. And, and I suppose that's sort of looking a little blue collarish. White collar would be the same. They're busy, they're flying, or they're at work, or, and they just haven't got time to go and watch the kids play footy or go to dancing or whatever it is that they do. And they're under stress, they're busy in their head. So there's an expression I think I've used before where it's called being busy elsewhere. So even if the person is present physically, they're not necessarily emotionally or energetically present. And that has a huge impact on kids, on their self-worth. So if I get one thing through today, and this time of self-isolation is just such a perfect time, as you mentioned before, for parents to work on their connection with their kids, to actually take time to play with them, and just give them space, just be with them and let the children show themselves and feel safe to show themselves. Because when they do that and you respond to them with smiles, with laughter, with giggles, with tickles, with cuddles, with verbal feedback, I love your smile, or I love, and it's not forced. It's just, oh God, you're so cute. I just want to squish you up and, all those sorts of gorgeous things, that it's okay for dads to do that.
There is that step that
children will come up feeling more self-worth, more self-esteem, more secure and safe in the world, and you'll have stronger, more confident, more explorative, more daring, more even more intelligent, because they'll be able to focus and trust themselves. Your kids will just be more of who they really are in a positive sense.
It is really interesting because, I guess there is that stereotypical male thing, and there might be a stereotypical female who works all the time and doesn't spend enough quality time with her son or daughter. And it's one of those things where, for someone like me who's can look back on my childhood and go, oh, I wish this was done differently. I guess that's a unique perspective. One of the biggest things I definitely agree with you is spend more time with your kids, whether or not you like doing it, whether or not you think that you're busy. At the moment, most of us are working from home, at least if you're lucky enough to work from home. Take your half an hour food break or lunch break that you would normally take at work. Take it with your kids.
When you feel angry at anyone, in this context, we're talking about children. When you feel angry at your kids for taking up your time, they feel it, and they feel it as a rejection. Now, it might be a situation where, you're actually working from home. You've got to get some report done. You've got to get it out. You've got a call coming in. It's all got to be ready. So, you do have to manage that, but you need to speak to them about it rather than just treating them like they're annoying. It's the way that we respect our kids and communicate with our kids that is going to make a big difference to how they interpret your behavior.
Yeah.
So if you're clear to them that, sorry, darling, I know you really want me to sit down and watch this with you or do this with you, whatever it is, I can't do it right now, but let's make a plan to do it later or whatever it is. They might whinge and moan about it. Oh, you're never available. Well, that might be true too. Maybe you do need to have a look at how unavailable you are. But the other thing we haven't talked about here today that's really, really important, and perhaps this is a conversation for next time, is about the energy not being available. Mm-hmm. Now, this is going much deeper, where people aren't actually physically, vibrationally connected to others.
Yeah.
So you can have really, really good intentions, but you're just not actually energetically available.
And that's a huge topic in itself, which
it happens in the relationships, it happens in parenting, it happens in friendships, it happens all over the place. So I think that's a natural next step for us for our chat next week. And I really want to, discuss that, because this is something that people talk about. It's like, oh, my mum, she was a good mum. She did all the right things and so on and so on. But I just didn't get a connection. I just didn't get what I needed from her or with Dad. That's the part that I want to talk about. And yes, our bonding and our attachment style with our child, who then becomes, a grown person and has children, and then that affects their own bonding. That's all part of it. But it also affects our energy blocks in our body. Now, I know some people are going to not agree, they're not into this sort of thing, but our energy body is a real thing. It's been proven on scans, MRIs, I don't know which ones, but it's a real thing, and it's something absolutely worth discussing, because it makes a huge impact on well-being of everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important topic that we will talk about most probably next week.
Yeah, for sure.
And look, there's other topics that we haven't really talked about, such as like breaking the cycle, if you are, because that's a huge topic as well. There are so many topics that we could talk about, and if you at home are watching this or listening to this on the podcast version, don't forget that you can suggest a topic to us, and that we might be able to discuss on the show. And if you are a parent who is listening to this or watching this at home, right now you're most likely going through one of the toughest times of your parenthood, because normally you would send your kids off to school, but now because of social lockdowns and schools closing today, this is literally the last day of schools for a little while, and the next semester it's going to be all online. It's going to be a very interesting time to be a parent, and the biggest thing is, don't overreact. If you're a parent who doesn't understand something, reach out to other parents. Network that. We've got social media. Like, we're doing this live on Facebook, for example. You can reach out to social groups. You can create a group. If you don't believe there's a group for you, create a group and invite people. There's many parents out there who are doing it tough right now, just the way that you are at home. So
and also understanding our kids' development is really important. So speaking to someone like myself and getting a bit more information around what's actually going on, because as you said, normally they're at school and not necessarily having to deal with these things all day, every day. It becomes incredibly challenging. And if we don't really know the psychological stuff that's going on in the kids, then we can't adjust our parenting in order to best meet their needs.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's really important, to get the right information and the guidance as well. Yeah.
it's really interesting that you talked about that as well, and maybe this is a topic that we have to talk about next week, because look, there's kids who live at home who, like, for me, let's quickly touch on it. I was 16. I was living next door to my parents, biological parents, and I said that I don't want to turn out like my parents. Now, in my head, what does that mean? That meant that I didn't want to become an alcoholic, and I didn't want to be domestic violence. Now, I'm pretty much can claim that I haven't done any of those. I know how to get drunk, and I can drink quite quickly, as I've quite recently learnt. But it's also about just like breaking the cycle. Like they say that these things are generational. That if you're a child that witnesses domestic violence, you're more likely to become someone who does do the same thing. And it's like you have to be able to break the cycle as well. And that's a whole different topic that I think we should discuss down the track.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my question.
So that has been helpful for people. We did sort of go all over the shop a bit, but I have got heaps of information around this sort of stuff on my website, and now you can see it more clearly on your phone as well. I'm still finishing off a paper that I'm writing about, an article about attachment and bonding.
Yep.
So I'm going to get on and get that finished today and load that up as well. And of course, if anyone wants to ask questions, I do free phone calls with people. If they can just book in for what I call a discovery call, and essentially that's just having a chat about what's going on for you and looking at what's the next best step going forward.
Sure.
And whether that's booking in a session with me or something else. Just if anyone wants to do that, you can just go to my website, and it's all available online. And the website's indigo-grace.com.au, and when you go to the bookings page, you'll see there's actually a free discovery call, and you just click on it and book it, and it's all sorted, and I'll see you face to face online like this, or even over the phone. And a lot of everything that I do, the healings, the shamanic stuff, the psychotherapy, all of that, it can all be done online. So it's no problem with this time of isolation. And now's the time where we have time to actually finally address things that we've been thinking, one day when I've got more time. And I should mention, I've done a big price reduction because of the time that we're in, and people haven't got their jobs, including, a downturn for me. Because of that, I've reduced my prices so that it's more affordable for more people. And I'm hoping that others will be supporting me in making those bookings as well. So it's that knock-on effect, isn't it?
It's definitely one of those things where I think like we're all going through a tough time, and I was actually going to ask you a question, which is, how are you?
How am I? So I was in self-isolation for 2 weeks up until yesterday. I'd been to the shops probably twice in that time, and for food, and what else? That was it, food. And yesterday, because I came back from Melbourne the day I happened to already have a flight booked to return the day that the be back across the border, because I'm in Perth, if anyone isn't sure, by 1:30 that day, and I flew in at like 1:50. So I met that criteria. However, I still wanted to self-isolate because it was the right thing to do. And I'm not sick. So whether I'm a carrier is another thing. I don't know. I haven't been tested, but I haven't been sick, which is great. But I do live alone, and I'm single, and my closest family members and friends, one lives up north, one lives down south, and my parents are self-isolating because of their age and so on. So I've actually been incredibly alone, which is not unusual for me. Self-isolating is almost same for me with my lifestyle, because I live alone and I've got my 2 dogs and my cat. But normally I would be interacting with people. I'd have clients coming in and out and that sort of thing. So it has been less, obviously there's been less contact than usual, and not going out for coffee, not going to the shops, all that sort of stuff. So I actually have found yesterday, it's interesting that it was the exact 14 days, I was feeling really low and flat, and really could feel the need to get out. Like, for my mental health, I actually needed to get out of the house and be around people. And that was just enough. I had to go and do some food shopping and pick up stuff for the dogs and so on and so on. So I did all of that, and it was really good to at least just talk to people at the shop, even though, it's not the same as catching up with a friend.
Yeah.
So I did post something about noticing the warning signs about your mental health and knowing what your warning signs are. And for me, getting that flat mood is a definite sign.
It's really important to understand your mental health, and definitely in a time like this. Look, we had a show last night called Open Bar, which was, their slogan was "Don't drink alone." Even in this time of pandemic where people are self-isolating, there's ways to, even if you are drinking, whether it be alcoholic or whether it be a cup of tea, or whether it just be you just want to chat. You can use the things like Facebook Messenger, Skype, WhatsApp, Telegram. There are so many apps out there to help you connect with people, and it's really just about being connecting. Like, this is something, like, normally we will go to the park or go to the pub or whatever it is, go to the beach on a 33-degree day like today, but we can't. So it is really all about supporting each other and being there together. And look, check in with your mates. Don't forget, if you besides ringing Indigo-Grace, you could always, if Indigo's not awake, you can always ring a lifeline on 13 11 14. They're a great service. Beyond Blue, Kids Helpline for kids. There are so many great services out there. Some are free, some are paid. Look, my GP has just started doing telehealth because they literally stopped everyone going into the GP clinic. So
my
now
parents have been using that.
Yeah, so at least now I can telehealth my doctor. But it's just, look, it's honestly just, right now, we're going through a bit. We as the human race are seeing that. What I kind of like to put it in this metaphor. What we did to animals by locking them away or like pushing them out of their natural habitat, now we get pushed back into out of our natural habitat. We're now the caged animal that the other animals get to watch. As such.
Yeah, the tables have turned. I loved seeing, I don't know where it was, an image of goats reclaiming the streets.
I love the dolphins. Seeing the dolphins in Italy's river canal, like, that is just
in Venice.
Yeah, it's just like, it hasn't happened in so many years. Strangely enough, last night news came out that 2 polar bears in China Zoo, who have not mated because of the people, have finally successfully mated.
Finally, privacy.
Yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed, that these 2 pandas have a little baby or 2. I don't know how many babies pandas have.
Maybe one.
But like
maybe he was having performance anxiety.
Everyone kept saying that. But this is the thing.
Cliche.
If we really should be looking like I really do hope, on a side topic, that we take this time, we look at what is happening Not to us, like, don't worry about us, but to the wild. Like, look at these two polar bears who have just mated. Look at the dolphins coming back to Venice and canals. Look at the pollution levels dropping quite astronomically.
Dramatically.
Um,
Yeah.
and do we? Is that the world that we actually want? Like, personally, it's the world that I would like. And
We had this big discussion a couple of weeks back, didn't we?
we did.
And put it online. Yeah.
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 It's
Well worth thinking about. But
it is.
also, how do I want my family and my relationships to look
Yeah.
through this and after this? You know, do we really want to go back to the way things were, whether things were, you know, too fast paced, too frenetic, too busy, not making choices around what's important to our soul, you know, to our happiness, but more about what's, you know, we've got to make the bills, we've got to make the mortgage, we've got to keep the boss happy, you know, all those things. And life's just has had such an imbalance, I feel, for so many people. And so if we're able now to make some positive permanent changes back towards our instincts and what's healthy, then that'll be amazing for us, but particularly for the children who are our future.
Yeah. Look, I guess that's a good place to end today's show.
I think so. I think so.
Firstly, I want to thank everyone who's watched on Facebook and who has downloaded the podcast. Thank you very much for supporting our station, DRM1 and One Life Radio, and supporting Indigo-Grace with her show, Your Story with Indigo-Grace.
It's been amazing. I can't believe the amount of followers and viewers. It's just, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, you know, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So until next week, I'm Russell.
I'm Indigo.
And this has been Your Story with Indigo-Grace. Bye.
Bye for now.